Well, hello everybody. So
Hello,
good.
hello.
Really appreciate you joining us again for another episode of Dive In. And today we're going to be talking about the high seas.
The high seas and everything below, briefly. That's just most of the world, as we know. Huh.
So we've got today we're going to start off and we're going to show some slides and we'll just be talking through some of them, but we really think that it's important for people to understand where are the high seas. We talk about the bounding main and going beyond the exclusive economic zone of different countries, but what does it really mean? Where are the high seas? And this one?
No. There. The world is blue, after all. That's it. As you can see, as the astronauts saw half a century ago for the first time, the world is blue. Hit it again. Oh, most of the world anyway. Should this not be full screen?
Sure, you're right.
Let's go back one,
Pardon me.
like this.
There we go. Oh,
There.
oh dear, now we have music.
We should. The blue face of the planet. This is what the astronauts really see when they are looking at the Pacific. Where's the land? Well, here's some of the land. But half of the world is beyond the jurisdiction of any nation. What you see here, in those little outlines of the continents and the islands, that's where humans have declared this is ours. This is the United States, or this is Chile, or this is the country of little Puerto Rico, or the little country of Palau. The little island countries have a lot of ocean that they claim. But most of the world is blue. And now we know that the ocean drives climate and weather, connected to the skies above. And if you've been paying attention this week to the news,
All right, this remarkable, we can see it in this slide just from this past week, of this huge dust storm that's
in
been
Africa,
it originated in Africa and now it's
the
made its
Sahara
way
Desert,
right, the Sahara, and it's made its way all the way across, and now impacting the Caribbean and beyond. And this carries with it, the dust carries with it, all manner of
stuff,
right? Even viruses can impact coral reefs.
Not the virus.
No, not the virus, but
others.
definitely impacts air quality. What settles out onto the sea, you can see here, what would normally be a sky the color of your nice jacket here, is
Blue.
just sort of this dark gray.
That's in Puerto Rico, and that's kind of right now. But that cloud is coming across to dust the snows of Colorado up in the high mountains.
It touches everybody.
And it'll reach all around the world eventually. It shows how everything connects. And the high seas, some would say, well, it keeps us apart, but it also brings us together. And the air above and the waters below.
And it's the home of all your favorite little tiny guys.
Well, that dust also carries nutrients, and it's a part of the natural system. So that green water that you see, hands holding the big bottle, that is really green with creatures so small that we didn't even know of their existence until the mid-1980s. And there's a scientist at MIT, Penny Chisholm, and her team, her associates, were out in the ocean sampling plankton, and they were using a different technique, and for the first time came up with a discovery of what turns out to be one of the most abundant creatures on the planet. We didn't even know that it existed, let alone that it generates much of the oxygen in the atmosphere and takes up carbon dioxide.
This is going to be your vocabulary word of the week,
Yeah.
which is
Prochlorococcus. Prochlorococcus. Every little kid should learn the name Prochlorococcus. In fact, one of my grandsons has a T-shirt.
Oh dear. Okay, he's not going to be happy about this.
It's all right. This is grandson Taylor sporting his T-shirt with Prochlorococcus on it. Well, Prochlorococcus helps drive the food webs in the ocean, as well as generating oxygen that you're breathing, that I'm breathing, that you, whoever you are out there, you're breathing.
Everyone
thank
take
you,
that deep breath.
Prochlorococcus.
Yeah.
Thank you, trees. Thank you, grass. Thank you, all the other green things. But to imagine it, maybe, a big chunk of what's in the atmosphere over long periods of time has come out of the ocean. About half of the oxygen has been generated over, again, we're talking gazillions of years, into the atmosphere. And of course, we're drawing it down with every breath we take.
Right. And what we're putting into the ocean really impacts the chemistry of the ocean, as we've seen today. So, everything we're putting into it, from sewage to pharmaceuticals to, oil to, all kinds of things that go in, are altering that chemistry.
Yeah.
And altering how efficient organisms like Prochlorococcus can be in producing the oxygen that we all rely upon.
And this looks like little bits of plastic. No, this is a
good ocean.
Yeah, this is a good ocean.
This is a healthy ocean.
These are the little guys that eat Prochlorococcus and diatoms and other little green guys in the ocean.
But these are those ocean drifters that really occupy so much of the high seas. And, when people looking at the ocean, looking at, even from space, looking at the ocean, they see this sort of blue face. But it's a very vertical environment.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people don't think about, that it's full of life just top to bottom.
Yeah.
Miles deep in some spaces, averaging, about 4,000 meters on average?
2.5 miles.
2.5 miles, and just, some
loaded with these little critters. Now that's a little critter called a sea walnut.
A sea walnut,
really? Yeah. They look like a little jellyfish. They're about the size of your thumbnail, that round part with these feathery projections. Baby fish are there, and young sea urchins. The spines are already starting. And
is that a barnacle?
That's a barnacle, and it's a baby. It's a baby barnacle.
Fun fact, they eat with their feet.
I know some kids like that too.
I know, right? So, but yeah, those little ocean drifters that make up so much of what really makes up the high seas.
And jellies.
And jellies, of course.
Lots of jellies.
The favorite food of sea turtles and mola mola.
Mola mola, the ocean sunfish. We'll talk about that on some future occasion.
But all driving this huge food web. The magic bait ball, right? Or so-called bait ball.
Little fish eat smaller fish, eat zooplankton, eats Prochlorococcus, and all of it ultimately winds up as chow for the bigger guys, like you see here, dolphins having lunch.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and to be a diver going into the midst of that, it's amazing, but it's kind of scary too. You don't want to become somebody's lunch. And the whales, of course, these big animals that are so reliant on.
They need groceries.
Yeah.
They need the little fish. And all of it goes back to sunlight, photosynthesis, Prochlorococcus, got it? Diatoms, and all the other green things that make the world go round.
And the wonderful domino shark, aka the whale shark.
The biggest fish in the sea.
Yeah.
Now it looks as though you shouldn't get too close to that big mouth, but I have been really close to those whale sharks.
Yeah, we see you there.
Oh yeah, there I am, looking very small next to the big domino shark. But they're interested in the little guys.
Yeah.
You'd have to go out of your way to get stuck in the mouth of a whale shark. They don't have any teeth anyway.
Yeah.
They just little fine projections.
But it really drives home the point of why the high seas need protection, almost more than some of the coastal areas in some cases. It's really an area that's out of sight, out of mind, and it's very heavily impacted not only by ship traffic and the noise that happens on the surface and kind of rains down on everything, but by a few nations that really take advantage of fishing in the high seas, trawling
the Wild
deep.
West out there.
It really is the Wild West, and then of course the related threat of the deep sea mining interests that want to scour the bottom in some of the areas that are beyond national jurisdiction.
And one of the reasons we wanted to talk about the high seas is that this year, 2020, is kind of a big year of deciding the fate of half the world. The high seas. You know, it's a global commons. Nobody owns it, or everybody does, or nobody does. It's beyond national jurisdiction. The United Nations has the governing say, and that's what's happening right now. There are deliberations underway, both for deep sea mining and for protection of large areas of the high seas by international agreement to develop a policy, governance of the high seas. Right now, it's almost anything goes. Yeah.
And we see these large fish, large marine mammals. It's like these are their highways, and their migratory routes. And we've learned the lesson on the land that we have to protect areas where migratory species travel between. And in the sea, it's just still this driven by extraction, and it is sort of this Wild West mentality that happens, in particular around beautiful animals like these tuna.
We have the impression that it's only valuable when you've taken it out.
Yeah, extract it.
Extract it. That an ocean is good for what we can remove from it or what we can put into it. And one of these occasions, we'll talk about what we're putting into the ocean, which isn't good news, but there is good news because of some of the things that are happening to address the things we have put into the ocean. We really have to think about both what we're taking out and what we're putting in, because this is the time, like a turning point. Either we'll continue on this downward spiral,
plummet,
or we'll recognize that the most important thing that we take out of the ocean, no, it's not Prochlorococcus.
No.
It's the benefits, though. It's our existence. It's our prosperity. It's our life. That's what we take from the ocean. We don't have to take a single additional fish, or not even one manganese nodule, mine the ocean, to have the greatest gift from the ocean of all. Like, do you like being alive? Thank you, ocean. Thank you. I'm here because you exist.
Exactly.
I exist because you exist. And because you're filled with life. And it just seems perverse that we have this attitude of, it's there free. The fish are free. Let's go get them.
Yeah. And the fish, that they have such interesting relationships with each other, with one and with other species, and just the thought that there are excess fish in the ocean. They're not. I mean,
ask the fish, and they'll say, "Wait a minute."
Oh, we said we weren't going to show that.
Yeah. Well, just a brief look.
Yeah.
Anyway, because for some people that is like, woohoo! Look what we caught.
No, I know, but
it's right now. Fish in the ocean are in serious trouble. 90% of many of the fish that we take to market have already been extracted. And we're seeing the impact not just on the individual species, like bluefin tuna, less than 3% remaining in the Pacific based on the best numbers that come from the tuna industry themselves. A little better in the Atlantic, but not much. It's, plus or minus 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that's in just a few decades. Since the 1970s, there's been such increased pressure. We have the ability to find them, catch them, take them to market, and the results are pretty clear-cut.
They really are.
And now we're looking at the deep sea. Same attitude. Let's go get it.
Let's go get it. So we just need to leave it be.
This is the deep sea, not discovered this kind of activity.
In the high seas.
In the high seas toward the end of the 1970s, 78. And now we're finding that these hydrothermal vents where hot water comes jetting out of areas of volcanic activity in the deep sea. Even knowing how much volcanic activity is a discovery of the latter part of the 20th century. More volcanoes under the ocean, by far, than what we have on the land.
And the ones that haven't come through the surface yet, the sea mounts, are just biodiversity
Rich.
rich,
Yeah.
just beautiful areas.
Leave them alone.
Leave them alone, yes, please. Well, unless we want to go explore them,
Oh yeah, we
but
can.
let's not go fish them.
No, or
Oh,
mine
look at
them.
these cool things. These are the deep sea worms that they actually use chemosynthesis
They
versus
don't require sunlight.
at all.
They don't gobble up Prochlorococcus.
No.
Got that word?
But these
And
worms they're like bigger than we are. They're 6-7 feet long,
yeah,
and just very fast growth rate, and then a huge community of creatures associated with them. There's clams and small crabs and
associated with them and internal to them.
right,
They have bacteria within their tissues that do the heavy lifting of creating nutrients out of the chemicals that are in the surrounding seawater. Chemosynthesis. It's great. Another topic for a future presentation or it's
discussion. But
a
the
lot
high
of that going
seas.
on.
But this comes back to this verticality
Hmm.
that exists in the high seas. That's really worthy of our attention and our exploration and our protection.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's important because there's so little that's explored or understood, and usually we're running around on the surface and we're trying to map the bottom. We want to see what the terrain is like,
And we should.
but we also have to think about what's in that water column
Yeah.
and how do creatures travel on these vast ocean currents that drive the weather, but they also carry animals from point A to point B. They allow animals to begin populating new seamounts as they come up from volcanic activity on the seafloor.
Yeah.
They start to become populated with things. It's really, we look at the currents of air, wind as it's going over continents.
Carrying sand
Think about the
from
jet stream and carrying that dust and whatnot.
all the way from
But
the
the
Sahara.
same thing happens under the water.
Yeah.
There can be areas, as big as the Mississippi River just coursing by that.
Look at the Gulf Stream.
The Gulf
There's
Stream. You don't want to try submersible diving in the Gulf Stream, trust me.
or in any of these other high-speed currents.
No.
You go whoosh,
So-
unless you have in mind to sort of travel like
A drift dive, yes.
the turtles do. They use the currents as highways. Yeah.
And then these beautiful animals that imagine what a trawl would do to these guys.
Imagine that the existence of corals in the deep sea is like a relatively new discovery, although scientists as far back as the late 1800s with the Challenger expedition, even before that, there were scientists in Europe who were using nets and trawls just to sample the deep sea, and they found examples like this, but it really didn't stick in the minds of most scientists. You think of corals, you think of coral reefs, you think of shallow water and beautiful sunlit sparkling areas where divers love to go. I'm one of them. But until very recently, when we could effectively get into the deep sea, we've largely ignored those deep coral formations. Oh, they're so beautiful and so important.
And it really points to the reason why it takes more than just mapping an area to really understand it. We have to be able to get there and to really understand the relationship between animals like this, why they sort of all grouped up together like this on the bottom.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of curious.
It's a community.
It's a little community that's cropped up. And if you were to drag a trawl through here to sample, or if you're a fisherman or to catch fish, and you bring this sort of disparate bunch of pieces to the surface, there's no way that you can tell
I've
how
heard,
does that work.
I've heard fishermen call that mixed stuff bycatch gumbo. It just looks
no.
like gumbo. It's like stuff all jammed up together.
Yeah, but I mean, think about how many different species are in this one little frame here. I mean, you've got to have dozens, maybe hundreds of species if you're looking at the small guys
Probably,
too.
even more importantly, the big wedges of life, the phyla, the categories, as different as bees and buzzards.
Birds and bees, great.
Vertebrates and invertebrate.
Right.
Anyway.
But this does show a huge diversity of what is down there.
Yeah. So, we're looking forward to having some questions. That's the most important part of these sessions. But just looking ahead, you'll hear we have several of them lined up, including next time, what's it like to live underwater? To be out there, to be a part of a coral reef for at least a couple of weeks. and several other things you'll hear about that we've got lined up, but we really want to hear from you. What what ideas do you have? Let us know. We are all ears.
No, so I think we should probably take some questions.
Yes, we should.
Yeah.
Let's go back to full screen.
We can get up here. I'm going to stop our sharing. And so we should be back to see you now here in the library. And see what kind of questions we've got coming in.
Oh.
Jenny is asking us,
Yes.
would you agree that naming specific parts of the high seas and promoting their unique characteristics would make them more accessible to the public? Just highlighting the features below the waves shows how areas obviously are not just empty and vast stretches of blue, but quite the contrary. How should we go about it?
Well, it's a great idea. In fact, it has been done. But first I want to know, are we in the full screen or are we just...
Yeah, we are.
Are we? For
yeah,
sure.
This is your view. It's fine.
Okay. All right. All right. There's a place out in the Pacific off the coast of California, way south of the Hawaiian Islands, called the White Shark Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a place where great white sharks are known to travel and then turn around, come back to California, or to go to another destination further away, even as far away as Japan. But it's like a special place to white sharks. We don't know why. We don't know why. But Barbara Block, Stanford University, has actually given that name because it highlights the importance of this to life in the sea. We should make it important too. The Sargasso Sea is a well-known high seas area. We'll talk about, I think that would make a great topic if you agree. It's in the Atlantic. It's a floating golden forest of seaweed. If you're a fish, you look up and you see not blue in many parts of the Sargasso Sea. You have this golden ceiling of seaweed that's a haven in the middle of the high seas. It's a stopover place for lots of creatures, including turtles, young sea turtles. Otherwise, little turtles swimming around in the open blue is just likely to get gobbled up by somebody looking for lunch. But in a cover of seaweed, it has a safe haven.
Yeah.
But yes, totally agree. Great idea. You can, in a sense, personalize it.
It does make it a bit more personal, I think, because I mean, we do think about the Sargasso Sea. That's long been an area that people have
Columbus
recorded it, right?
Yeah.
Because it was just such a shocking thing to come across. It was this huge expanse of sargassum weed, and becoming becalmed in it, and these great stories, mariner stories about them. But I think we do have to get them to be more personal to people in order for them to care. Another reason about needing to get out there and explore.
The Central American Dome or the Costa Rica Dome is another area off the west coast of South America that's been given a name because it's got a feature of importance. But wherever there are these seamounts, there's a place that I've learned about from our friend Richard Pyle who's at the University of Hawaii, called Gray Feather Reef. It doesn't break the surface, but it comes close enough to the surface that maybe enough sunlight penetrates to be able to support photosynthesis. It certainly supports a lot of other creatures. So we need to look around the world and think about using that technique.
So Christina's asking us, how much of the high seas is protected now, and do we know how deep sea mining might affect the currents?
Two good questions. But the high seas, very little. We take all of the ocean together. The goal for 2010 that has been set by UN and United Nations and many other organizations was 10%. And then to say 20%
by
by
2020.
2020.
What
Actually, it
happened
was
there?
by 10%.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a shifting thing because
Shifting baseline.
we didn't get to
Yeah.
10% by 2010. We didn't get to 10% by 2020. Right now, it's, if you count everything, even the managed areas that are not great at really protecting it's about 7%. Fully protected, maybe a little under 3%, depending on how you count. Some say less than that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the high sea, again, do you count the waters around Antarctica as high seas? Effectively, yes, because nobody owns Antarctica. It's a global commons. Nations signed a peace treaty saying there'd be peaceful uses of Antarctica, the continent. But unfortunately, they did not make peace with the ocean at the same time.
It sounds kind of like the Galapagos.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah,
But it's just the same question. I mean, James is asking this kind of a similar question from New Zealand. Thank you. He's just asking,
yeah.
how hard has it been to agree on international MPAs in the Antarctic waters of the Southern Ocean? And how are we going to overcome difficulties to designate MPAs and make them truly lasting? So how to not have a paper park, for example.
Or to have, as we have in this country, one administration try to undo what another administration has already put in the
So
bank.
infuriating. And how can we overcome national, often primary economically driven interests to make the decisions truly in our collective and vital interests?
Well, knowing that as Tim Worth, American statesman, once put it succinctly, that the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. If you don't take care of the environment, you can't even have an economy. A healthy environment means you can have a healthy economy, healthy people. But if you have stripped away the things that make life and livelihoods possible, that's when you get disease, that's when you get hunger, you certainly don't have a healthy economy.
No.
It should be like this. Understanding that we have to have a healthy environment as underpinning of everything else.
Well, I mean, we're really seeing it right now during the pandemic. I mean,
right.
The results of this sort of sustained assault on the natural systems.
Right.
And
unraveling the healthy natural systems, keeping animals, whether it's in a farm situation, a cause of diseases that humans have experienced in the past and even now. The swine flu didn't start in the wild.
No.
It started with stressed animals that were in captivity. The current one, well, again, you can't blame the bats or the pangolins. You can look at humans and say, what were we thinking?
Yeah. Why pull these animals from the wild and mash them up in these kinds of environments?
They're stressed, and that's when they are diseased, and that's when they're most susceptible, which makes us vulnerable.
Right.
And so,
and with the high seas, it's just, why won't do you think that the UN won't really step in and help?
Well, it's a people thing. If people don't know, they can't care, and most people haven't yet absorbed that reality of how important it is to protect the natural world and to use their personal power. That we have a voice. Everyone has a voice about Antarctica. We just are not aware that we do. But if we could, in each of the countries that we happen to represent, use our power and say, look, I have a vested interest in the future of Antarctica. It isn't just up to that group of select individuals who are part of the deep sea mining group, or that the CAMELAR is the conservation organization authorized by the United Nations, but who authorizes the United Nations? People, countries. Go back to the source of the power. We all have that power, but we somehow feel that we don't have the capacity to be heard. Find a way to voice your power and let people know that maybe they don't know. Maybe they can't see what you see about the value of protection of the waters around Antarctica, for example, where I have to say the largest marine protected area in the world right now is in Antarctica, around the Ross Sea. And it was a monumental decision. Right after President Obama declared what at the time was the largest marine protected area on the planet, the Papahanaumokuakea National Monument that quadrupled the size of what President George W. Bush had done. All these are really important acts. But when, again, you put them all together and you say areas that are highly or fully protected, we're still looking at under 3% of the ocean. How much of your heart would you say is important to protect? If you think it's the ocean that keeps us alive, and we're just going to keep stripping things out of it, when are we going to learn we have to take care of what keeps us alive?
And and just getting meaningful protection for the high seas would be such an accomplishment.
In a stroke, we could protect half the world.
Yeah.
By saying, let's just pause and say, you who are out there on the high seas, or mainly 5 nations, but about a dozen overall, large-scale industrial fishing. This is not feeding communities, families, quite the opposite.
It's feeding luxury tastes.
And with slave labor.
Yeah, oftentimes.
Often there's a real problem with the kind of fishing operations. There's illegal, unregulated, and
piracy. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
But the biggest problem is what we think of as it's okay.
Yeah.
It's legal.
Yeah, because we don't
unreported is the other
unreported. Yeah, we don't really track very well. I mean, in some cases we do, but oftentimes we're not really tracking where fish comes from.
Right.
It comes back to one of the things that anyone can do. It's just knowing where your food comes from, eating locally, eating seasonally, and trying to make these personal choices that can lead to bigger impacts, more protection for areas, and yeah, I mean, writing, supporting,
use your power, whatever
use
it
the
is.
Power, help support some of the efforts of what the ocean elders are doing to try to get the UN to actually protect some of these areas.
Well, there will be another discussion. Check out with ocean elders a webinar coming up to discuss the high seas with some real experts who will discuss the policies, the regulations, and also what you can do about it.
Yeah.
That's really the important thing, just knowing what the problem is and knowing where you can use your power most effectively.
I'm wondering if we have any live call-ins out there that might want to ask us.
Actually, we do. That was nice that you asked. Yes, we do. So especially because Fellaini has been waiting for a while here, and if she would like to have a direct conversation with Sylvia and Liz, go ahead, Fellaini. You have to unmute yourself at the bottom in order to speak. Maybe she dropped off or she doesn't know how to do it, but that's okay. It's fine. So we'll go ahead and see if April is there, because April has been speaking as well. April, would you like to jump in by unmuting yourself?
Yes. Wow. I feel honored. 2 weeks in a row that I've got to ask a question. But my question is, I came across an article about using horseshoe crab blood for trying to find a vaccine for COVID-19, and kind of what y'all were talking about as far as like over extracting things, and how do you find the balance, because us as humans are pushing these animals out of their habitats, which are coming in contact with us, and how we get COVID-19, but then we use these animals to try to cure it as well. How do we find a balance where we're not over extracting these resources to help cure something that we could avoid in the first place?
Oh, you're strumming my heartstrings now. It was on the New Jersey shore when I was a little kid that I fell in love with horseshoe crabs. They're just the most amazing animals, and if anyone listening has never seen one, check them out. They are in a group of animals. There are only 4 species in an entire class of organisms. They're not related closely to crabs at all. They're more closely related to spiders, curiously, but they don't look anything like a spider. They look like a horseshoe crab. There's nothing else that looks quite like a horseshoe crab. And they go back at least 300 million years. They were around before dinosaurs. We should look at them not as products, not as some. There are 3 species in Asian waters that are taken to market for food. I've never seen one in a U.S. market for dining purposes. They're taken for 2 reasons. One, to use as bait, because the eggs of the females are used to capture eels, which should also be left alone right now. Their numbers are so low. But the other is to extract their blood for testing. But the good news is there is a synthetic version of the active ingredient in horseshoe crab blood that it does what is needed to conduct these tests. And if industry would really invest more in the large-scale production of the synthetic version and just leave the horseshoe crabs in the ocean, it's for their sake, of course, but they're part of an ecosystem. It's one that has grown up literally over millions of years, that involves the time when the horseshoe crab is coming ashore, which is right about now, along the Jersey shore, up and down the eastern seaboard, down to Florida, parts of the Caribbean, where the females with their tag-along partners come ashore and deposit these beautiful jade green eggs. They're just amazing. And they come on the high tide, and then they sit in the sand and mature until the next high tide, next high tide about 2 weeks later.
Right.
And these tiny little horseshoe crabs go swimming off into the ocean, but they're also food for migrating birds that come through these long migrations from South America, and some even from
Further
Antarctica.
Yeah.
They come all the way up, stopping along the eastern seaboard, gorging themselves on the eggs, leaving enough so there are more horseshoe crabs in the future. They don't eat them all. I think that's the thing. There's no excess for humans who are newcomers. These ancient rhythms have been worked out between the birds and the crabs. There's a system that somehow has functioned for long before humans came as predators on top of the system. But in large measure because of habitat destruction, but secondly because of human predation, horseshoe crabs in 2020 are a fraction of what they were in the beginning of the 20th century when I was a kid. When my dad was born in 1900, his recollection of horseshoe crabs when he was a boy along the New Jersey shore is nothing like even what we sometimes see, like an avalanche of horseshoe crabs coming ashore. But it's just like just a small wave instead of a.
Right, and even the populations of the red knots that used to just come and really darken the sky at one point, and now we feel lucky to see.
Starving.
We see them along the shoreline again, coming for the eggs, but they're just a fraction of the numbers that they used to be.
That's right.
And so it's one of these things where, sure, we find out that the horseshoe crab, the beautiful blue blood of the horseshoe crab,
the unique blue blood. Well, they're unique animals.
But that does have an important use to us in proofing vaccines, and it's not just the COVID-19 vaccine, but they've been used in in vaccine
in testing.
in testing
Yeah.
for many, many years.
Mhm.
But when we find something like that from nature,
Don't kill them.
don't kill them. Don't, and again, having technology companies that work to rapidly synthesize something that can be used based on nature.
We know how to do it.
Look at aspirin, for example.
Aspirin.
Aspirin, right? It originally came from the bark of willow trees.
Right.
But we're not going out there and cutting down every single willow tree and
Every time you get a headache.
every time you get a headache to crush out the elements from it
Yeah.
to make aspirin, right? So
Yeah.
it's we can take things from nature, but we have to care for nature.
What's your thought about that, April?
My thought is, I mean, I didn't know that they could. Well, I knew about the aspirin thing, the willow trees, but I didn't know that you could synthesize or create, replicate horseshoe crab blood. So I just didn't know if there was some way to. I don't know, like find another way, because I know that they're, like you said, they're 300 million years old, and it's something that we don't want to go extinct. And I've before COVID-19, I've seen articles and stories about horseshoe crabs, being extracted, half of their blood being drained for research, and then they're thrown back into the ocean, and
Yeah, well,
they
that's
sometimes slowly die, and
Yeah, I mean,
it's not a recipe for
what
prosperity for sure.
what other animal out there would we like suck half its blood away
yeah,
and then sort of stick it back out in the environment and go, see you, hope you're okay,
yeah,
Good luck with that.
It's-
It's like catch and release. We think it's, the responsible thing to do, but the responsible thing to do is not hook them in the first place.
right.
I agree.
Unless you're,
Unless
if
you
it's
have a
your,
real need,
yeah,
you know,
if your source of true
true food.
sustenance.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, right. And so if there's any other questions out there, anyone else would like to speak directly to Sylvia and Liz, just raise your hand by finding the button in the middle of the bottom screen, and we'll call on you. So please feel free to do so.
yes.
Yes, thank you very much. We've got a couple other, we're waiting to see if other people raise their hand. We've got a couple of other questions that come in. What do you think about the growing movement to support the rights of nature? This is from James, and he's asking, what is the role of indigenous knowledge and people around the world in pushing forward this idea, this notion of working together with scientific knowledge to enhance protection?
Well, some of the best insights into the nature of nature are the people who've lived in a place for a very long time, not just as individuals, but as a culture. And we should be attentive, listen to the knowledge as well as the wisdom that accumulates over many lifetimes, and respect that. I learned a great deal from listening to fishermen. They know fish because if you want to catch a fish, you have to think like a fish in a way.
Right.
We're the places where if you were a fish, you would be. So nobody knows everything about everything. And just about the time you think you've got deep knowledge about something, you realize, oh, I hadn't known about that. So completely, James, to think about listening closely and being willing to admit you don't know everything. And you could be wrong, or you might be able to have true communication that scientists look at in ways that in today's world we couldn't imagine going back even 50 years ago. So there's knowledge to be shared both ways about how life histories of species that might be targeted for taking by indigenous populations, that based on the knowledge, how long does a whale live? What does it take? What do you know about the social structure now that we know? we can go with informed decisions about our relationship with them. Our history, going back from the beginning of humankind, I suppose, has been based on, like every other species, we take from nature to foster our prosperity. We eat our neighbors, our neighbors being the birds, the fish, the little furry things, the plants. And when our numbers are really small, we could take almost anything, even creatures that take a century to grow, like a turtle, or whales can take 20 years, or sharks can take 20 years just to get to the point where they can start to reproduce. There are things that really we didn't know, nobody knew until fairly recently. The importance of microbes. Most viruses, most bacteria, most of the archaea, most of the microbial world, from our viewpoint, are beneficial. Thank you that you exist, because of you, we exist.
Exactly.
We didn't know that within us, there's a microbiome within every whale, every horseshoe crab, everything. Living things are partnerships. And understanding this intricate give and take at the micro level, as well as right on up to dealing with our fellow humans, find out where we can learn from one another, how we can work together. I mean, there is this conquer and take over concept, but the real winners are those that find an enduring place within the systems that sustain them. And as a species, that's our job. We have to find an enduring place, not one where we conquer nature, that we just take. We've got to, back up. Let's think. Let's listen to people who've lived closely with nature for thousands of years. They have gifts, wisdom to share. And we have wisdom of new insights of what nobody could know until right about now.
Well, it's true. I mean, many of the stories from the indigenous peoples, they've been passed on for many, many generations. Right. And we need to sort of like take that knowledge, be able to bring new knowledge, new scientific knowledge together, but to really have those two lash up and be able to learn and have it in an integrated way.
Right. So
we've got a couple more questions. I don't know if we have any raised hands, but we've got a question who's from Colleen that is asking, what percentage of the U.S.'s EEZ should be declared an MPA?
Well, if I were the big boss, I would say, how much of the exclusive economic zone do we really need to have for vital human activities? I would I would just reverse things. I would go with, first, how can we behave ourselves to do the least harm in all of it? And areas that are of the utmost critical importance, we've found such areas on the land, we call them national parks. Full protection. And only when you've demonstrated and justify the need. Okay, you need a channel for ship traffic. Okay, got that. For our civilization to prosper, we need transport. We need to do it with respect for the impact, like noise, like ballast water. We need to understand that our highest priority at this point in human history, looking at the numbers, looking at what's happening with the climate, with the poisoning of the natural systems that we rely on for our existence, looking at the loss of biodiversity. There's a headline, more important but also related to COVID-19. It's respecting nature.
Yeah.
How do we look at the natural world? The ocean, most of the natural world is blue. And realize that we have to take care of it. We've taken throughout our history. Can't we, at this point, give back? So I would say let's start with all of it, and then just maybe it's 3% that we use for vital human needs and protect 97%. Just reverse things from where they currently are. I know that's a big ask, but if you're serious about forestalling carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere, you will protect the ocean. If you really understand the carbon cycle, you'll do the same on the land. You'll say, as Ed Wilson, a biologist at Harvard, has for years been saying, we need to at least protect half of the world, half of the land, half of the ocean, and to be strategic about it. Let's choose the places that we know are of critical importance. The places that are still in pretty good shape get a high priority. We can restore a lot of places that have been converted to human uses. You see it with the restoration of brownfields in cities. People converting their lawns into gardens and planting natural vegetation, for example.
Those are those one things again that
Yeah.
people can do.
That's right. Choose something,
Yeah.
whoever you are. But it's a roundabout answer to how much of the EEZ would you protect? Well,
Most of it.
yeah.
That's a short
Why,
answer.
why don't
So you
why,
got one
why
more?
don't we? Yeah, let's take one more from Christina, who's had her hand up, and then we'll take that as the last call-in question. So, Christina, if you unmute yourself, you can speak now, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
We can see you.
Okay, thanks. It's an honor to talk to you because you are one of my heroes. Sylvia, I'm calling from Venezuela, the Isla de Margarita. And my question goes like this. Because Venezuela has been changing the way we were protecting our marine national parks. Like now they are developing a lot of tourist projects and kind of other things, and they are damaging the corals and things like that. How can we assure that those protected areas are really protected? Because you can do a decree by legal procedures, but the government or people are not doing the right thing to protect that area that is legal to be protected. That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Well, I mean, it really comes back to, I think, the more engagement that local communities can bring to bear, the more one things that people do, making their voices heard to the people that are the leadership. You know, most politicians really care about how many votes they get. And
It's sort of primary, yeah.
Primary, and working with you know, enforcement agencies. I mean, here in California, our poor Department of Fish and Wildlife officers are just overwhelmed by how many you know, bad guys are out there just stripping resources and so forth, and they really rely upon private citizens to be out there as sort of their eyes and ears and to report, take photographs, document, send the information in so that they have some hope of being able to enforce protection.
And community pressure.
And community pressure. And, you know, in often cases, maybe making some of the penalties for these grossly extractive or polluting activities to be kind of on the same level of some of the more you know, heinous crimes that we think about, but really the crimes against nature are oftentimes just the little slap on the wrist, and
or a fine that they're so little that they
minuscule fine, and there's no real it's not really on par with the scale of the damage that's being done to the environment, and that comes back to the communities that are there. You know, when someone pollutes the water, then what are the local people supposed to do about their drinking water if it's full of, you know, some sort of noxious chemical or oils or other things?
Everybody pays.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think that it just takes more collective pressure.
So a partner organization for ocean elders, Mission Blue, you know, we work closely with communities, with local champions, but it's, in the end, it is about people, about our willingness to give back and to take care and to call out those who are misbehaving, because everybody pays.
Mm-hmm.
And
Everyone does.
Everybody, it's a bit like Antarctica. Nobody owns it, but everybody does, or nobody does. But it's how we do it. It's our behavior. Do we permit such things, to bad behavior, to go on?
Yeah.
And if we can, if we don't say anything or don't do something about it, it isn't as bad as the action that causes the trouble. But there has to be a way.
Yeah, we've got to speak up and not be silent when we see these things.
And we need to start really early with the ethic with kids.
We've got one last question.
Okay.
Okay. So you think that, because hearing it, we think that there's hope for ocean conservation in the UN Decade for Ocean Sciences that starts next year. How can young people in emergent countries make their voices heard? How can they help that would make it work?
Well, first of all, believe in yourself, and don't think that just because you're in a small country or a developing country, or that this decade is, climate scientists say, the most important 10 years will make it or break it. And it isn't just the climate, of course, it's everything. It's the diversity of life. It's the ocean, where most of the diversity of life occurs, and the ocean shapes climate and weather. Raise your hand and be willing to step out and let your voice, your desire, be known. And find that thing that you really care about the most, and be the best you can at doing that thing, whatever it is. For me, it was, and still is, science. I love being a scientist, and it's what I do my best to be really good at. There are other people who are really good with music, really good with art, really good with photography, really good at speaking, really good at something. When you become really good at something, whatever it is, you have power. It doesn't matter what part of the world you come from. In fact, I think there will be special opportunities for those who are currently underrepresented in positions of global power. So don't be discouraged if you get knocked back the first time or the second time. Please be persistent. Don't give up.
I agree.
Go for it.
And I think we're going to wrap at this point. We're kind of out of time, but we want everyone to remember to treat the ocean as if your life depends on it.
Because it does.
We'll see you guys next time.
We want to first thank our hosts for diving, Dr. Sylvia Earle and Liz Taylor. This was a really fun and informative conversation on the breadth of the planet's oceans and how it impacts each and every one of us on the planet itself. And to thank each of you for attending and participating. If you have additional questions or suggestions, please send them to mytownhallquestions@gmail.com. And thanks as well to our sponsors, Ocean Elders and Medley Media, for hosting and producing this event. A recording of this conversation will be available on Ocean Elders' YouTube channel shortly. Please check out our new summer schedule of events, and note that we are now live on Thursdays, not Fridays, through the remainder of the summer. And just keep a lookout for Ocean Elders' Facebook and Twitter feeds for all future events, as many pop up impromptu, and we don't want you to miss them. And please do send us your suggestions on topics that would interest you. Dive In is a show for all of us. As a special bit of extra information, we've listed not a complete list, but a good start to a complete list of books by Dr. Sylvia Earle for your reference. You can see that they're annotated for ones for a general population and ones that are specialized for children. If you do want to discuss any of these during the show, or even consider a reading group, please let us know. And to close, we encourage everyone to participate in the #OneThing campaign created by our sponsor, Ocean Elders. It's an easy and fun way to join a global community of individuals who are adapting their lifestyles one little piece at a time to take better care of our planet and our ocean collectively. See One Thing on Twitter. Thank you very much and have a great evening.